Do note that the incorrect examples are exaggerated on purpose so that the issues are easier to see. In my opinion, the correct examples do properly show what they are meant to show. However, they are in no way perfect. As an exercise, see if you can notice any issues with my form in the correct examples. If you do, leave a comment down below. In this episode, we'll be taking a closer look at transitions. I have mentioned them multiple times during the series, and you have already been doing some very simple transitions. In fact, if you have ever done anything with a sword, you must have done some transitions. Basically, transitions are exactly what the word means. They are what happens between two actions. When people drill and spar in modern HEMA, they are constantly doing transitions. Most people just don't realize it, or they decide to ignore transitions as they are not a technique. We are talking about transitions because they are extremely important. In actual fencing, they make up a huge portion of what we actually do with the sword. Transition can also make or break your defensive and offensive actions. As transitions are extremely important, if you do any longsword drilling, be it paired or solo, it is important that you pay attention to the transitions as you train. Now, let's start with some theory. As I said, transitions are simply what happens between two actions. It can be a transition from a guard position to an offensive or a defensive action. It can be a transition from an offensive action to a defensive or an offensive action. It can be a transition from a defensive action to an offensive or another defensive action. And the list just goes on. Transitions are simply moving from one action to another. If you remember the gripping section in episode 2, How to Hold a Longsword, I explained when you should and should not grip your sword tightly. Transitions are basically when you should not grip your sword tightly, not including standing in a guard position. The basic situations for transitions are the following. Transitioning from a guard. This does not include situations where the guard has already prepared the action. After a full cut. After a cut you stopped or which was parried. The important thing here is that the cut was not finished and it is also not stuck in your target. After a thrust or a failed cut. Here the important thing is that you have ended up with your sword inside your target. After a parry. As explained earlier, it doesn't matter to which action you transition from these situations. You can transition from any of these to an offensive action, a defensive action, or a guard position. That means that changing guards is a transition. As there are 5 basic starting situations and 3 basic follow-up actions, there are basically 15 different transitions. I have already shown a good part of this, but figuring out the rest by yourself shouldn't be too difficult. As I said, there are the 5 basic starting situations and the 3 basic follow-up actions, but in reality the list is way longer, and I won't even try to list all of them. For example, transitioning from a grapple to a cut. However, these special cases are not that important. In my opinion, if you master these 15 transitions, they cover everything important. Having built muscle memory for these basic cases should allow you to handle any special situation which might come up. This is the same basic principle as with anything else in cutting. If you achieve the required competence with the basic skills, you don't need to practice special situations. You can simply adapt those basic skills on the fly. Do note that if your fencing system has emphasis on something else, such as grappling, you want to pay special attention to that. In that case, you would want to train transitions to grappling and from grappling in addition to these basic cases. When doing transitions, there are two basic ways to do them: the linear way and the following the motion way. Let me demonstrate using transition between two descending cuts on the same line. In the linear way, you do the transition along the shortest possible line, or at least close to that. Usually it means that there is a sharp change in the direction of the sword when the transition begins. In the following the motion way, you allow the sword to continue along the path it was traveling and use the momentum to do the transition. This means that the sword is generally going to travel a longer distance. Here is another example using a transition from a cut to a parry. This is the linear version. And this is the following the motion version. There are no clear positives or negatives to either one. The clear difference is that the linear version takes a shorter path. This usually requires a sharp change in the direction of the sword, but not always. You simply need to practice both and see when they work and when not. One might be completely unsuitable for some situations and perfect for others. For example, following the motion to do a second descending cut on the same line can allow for a more powerful follow-up cut. On the other hand, trying to follow the motion to parry an attack to the opening your cut started from is going to take a long time and bring your parry in from an inconvenient angle. Now that we have established what transitions are, let's see how they should be done. As already said, the first thing you should remember is that you should relax your grip when you are doing a transition. This allows you to more easily maneuver the sword. Relaxing your grip is not exactly mandatory, but it will make the transitions easier and faster. If you try to do a complex transition with a tight grip and a loose grip, you should immediately notice the difference. With loosening your grip, you must still remember to maintain a proper grip through the first action. If you loosen your grip too early, it is very likely that you will fail your first action. For example, your cut will get stuck in the target, or your parry will let the attack through. From this we get to the second important thing: first action first. I have taken the base idea for this from Mike Edelson's book Cutting with the Medieval Sword. There it was phrased as first cut first. I have simply expanded this to cover all actions. This simply means that you should only worry about the current action. Don't think about the next one. If you are going to transition between two cuts, and you start to worry about the transition and the second cut before the first one is finished, it is quite likely that you will fail with the first cut. Or if you are going to transition from a parry to an attack, and you start to worry about the attack too soon, it is quite likely that the parry will fail. In both of these cases, if you fail the first action, there will be no follow-up action. The same is of course true with more than two actions. Only worry about the current one. This is because if you start to think about the transition and the next action too soon, you most likely will start to transition too soon. In the case of a parry, this might mean that you do not parry far enough and you get hit. Or in a case of a cut, you start to turn your sword while it is still inside your target. Naturally, both of these cases will cause a failure before you even get to the action you wanted to transition to. Another thing with transitions is that they tend to cause issues with the second action. As you now need to align your edge, make sure you have a proper trajectory, establish a good grip, and so on, during a small time window and while your sword is moving around, it will make doing these things much more difficult. We once again get back to start simple, add complexity. Transitions add a lot of complexity as you need to simultaneously do multiple things while under a time constraint. This is why we have done our transitions the way we have thus far, and this gets us to the next section. As just mentioned, transitions add a lot of complexity to cutting. This is why we have been splitting our simple transitions to smaller steps. For example, the ascending cut from a point in line guard exercise. We first rotate the sword so that it is ready for the cut. We do this at a leisure pace so that we can get to a good position to cut from. We then pause. Only then we start to worry about the cut. Here you see the first action first thinking. We separate the transition from the cut. As for the start simple, add complexity concept, we have removed any time constraints from the action. We have also tried to limit the things we need to do simultaneously. From here, we get to our first step in learning any transition. The formula is very simple. Action 1. Stop. Transition. Stop. Action 2. Here is an example for that using a descending cut, ascending cut combination. Do a full descending cut. Stop. Relax your grip. Rotate the sword so that it is ready for an ascending cut. Stop. Do a full ascending cut. This is how you should start every transition you want to learn. It doesn't matter if it has 2 or 5 actions. Split it to actions and transitions, and then add a stop between each action and transition. After you can do this so that the transitions are smooth and the actions are proper, cuts have a proper sword wind and so on, you can then start to remove the stops between the actions and the transitions. Do a full descending cut. As soon as the cut is done, relax your grip. Then rotate the sword so that it is ready for an ascending cut. As soon as your sword is lined up, do a full ascending cut. At this point, you might notice that one or both of the actions start to fail. Cuts no longer make a proper sword wind, and parries start to get shorter and shorter. When this happens, take a step back and add the stops back in. Then start making the stops shorter and shorter little by little until there are no stops left. You should continue using this kind of a progression until you can again do all of the actions properly and there are no longer stops between the actions and the transitions. The next step is to start blending the actions and the transitions together. The end goal is to be able to do the transition so that there is no longer a clear end for the first action and no clear start for the transition. The second action and the transition should also blend together. Here you must be very careful that you do not start the transition before the first action is complete. In case of a cut, the cut must have come out of the target before you start to transition. In case of a parry, you must have already stopped the incoming attack before starting the transition. When you are blending the transition to the follow-up action, you must have completed the transition before there is some kind of an hard requirement for the action. For example, the transition must have ended and the cut must have started properly before the sword comes in contact with the target. The same goes for parries. The transition must have ended and the parry must have started before your parry comes in contact with the incoming attack. This might sound very simple, but it will take considerable amount of time and effort before you can do it so that the action quality doesn't suffer. When practicing, you should be training at the very limit of what you are capable of. If you try to do the transitions too fast and you are consistently failing, you will be learning incorrect execution to muscle memory. If you keep consistently failing, slow down until you can succeed roughly 2/3 or 3/4 of the time. In my opinion, this is a good balance between not learning incorrect execution and having a challenging enough exercise. An important thing with transitions is that you should not try to learn transitions for actions which you are not proficient at. As this is a cutting series, you should not start bringing in transitions to the cuts you are not able to do consistently. In this case, that would mean being able to do all of the in-place progressions for the basic exercise for the cut. If you are not competent with the cut, you can't know if you are failing because of the transition or simply because you are not competent with the cut in the first place. Before going to some more exercises, let's talk briefly about cutting media, more specifically tatami. You can also use other cutting media for this, but as tatami is the only one I have any meaningful amount of experience with, I'm going to limit this conversation to that. The reason I'm bringing this up is because cutting media can enforce different aspects of a transition drill. The simplest is the quality of your cutting actions. If your cuts are poor, they will fail to pass through the cutting medium. What that limit is depends on the cutting medium. I will use the simple descending-ascending cut combination as an example here. In this example, the cutting medium will only enforce the quality of the cutting actions, nothing more. You can still take your time with the transitions and so on. You can add more cuts to make the exercise more difficult, but the only thing enforced is still going to be the quality of the cuts. The example shown here is the so-called lightning cut. There is a way to add a time constraint to this exercise. This can be done by using the so-called double cut. In a double cut, you will cut the second cut above the first one. In this example, I'm doing the cuts in reverse order, as that is a more common way of doing the double cut. It is also much easier than starting with a descending cut. Now the transition must be fast enough for you to catch the falling piece. As your target is slightly moving a bit, it also enforces some level of targeting. The quality constraint for the first cut is now also higher. If your first cut goes through, but sends the piece flying, it doesn't matter how good or fast your transition is. You simply will not be hitting that cut-off piece. On the other hand, if your first cut is very good, the time constraint will be more forgiving. This is because the cut-off piece will not be immediately falling off. You can make this drill even more difficult by adding a transition before the first cut. In the basic double cut example, you have all the time in the world to prepare for the first cut. This makes it easier to make a really good first cut, thus giving you more time for the transition. If you do the lightning cut example from before, but you do the last two cuts as a double cut, it will now make the quality constraint for the first transition much higher. The first transition, which was just added to the exercise, must be good enough for the second cut to allow enough time for the second transition. This is just a single example on how to add quality and time constraints to transition drills by using cutting media. This is in no way an exhaustive list, but it should give you an idea for where to start from if you can no longer find difficult enough transition exercises. Remember, transitioning is a skill which takes time to learn, so do not rush to these difficult exercises. It will take a considerable amount of practice before you reach the competence required for these exercises. Now that we know what transitions are and how to train them, let's take a look at some example exercises. Before we get to the first exercise, go and stab that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. This section of the episode is just a collection of example exercises. As already explained, a transition is simply what happens between two actions. Because of this, the amount of combinations is basically limitless, especially when there are more than two actions in the combination. This collection of exercises is supposed to give you an idea about different kinds of transition exercises. With this information, you can then come up with your own exercise for the transition you want to learn. As already explained, start by splitting the exercise in parts with stops in between. Then start to remove the stops. And finally, start to blend the actions together. Here I will show the examples first in parts and then a final execution with blended actions. Do note that some of the following exercises contain shortcuts. These will be explained in detail in the next episode. However, I thought it was important to show transitions containing shortcuts. I highly recommend that before you try these specific exercises, you watch the next episode. When you do the following exercises, make sure that you do not lean into any directions and that you keep your head level. Leaning is a very common issue when doing transitions between cuts. The only parts which should be moving around are your arms and the sword. As we want to use rotation around our spine to cut, it is important that our spine stays in place. Without further ado, let's take a look at the first category of exercises. Stand in the starting position. Have a good grip on the sword, but do not tighten your grip. Bring the point of your sword up, then back and then down in a circular motion until you reach the starting position of the dominant side ascending cut. Stop. Tighten your grip and brace. Cut as normally. Stand in a high point-in-line guard on your dominant side. For a detailed explanation, see the thrusting episode. Bring the point of your sword up, then back and then down in a circular motion until you reach the starting position of the dominant side ascending cut. To do this, bring your hands back and down as you are bringing the point back and down. Stop. Cut a proper ascending cut. Stand in a high point-in-line guard on your dominant side. For a detailed explanation, see the thrusting episode. Bring the point of your sword down to your non-dominant side, then back and up. Simultaneously, bring your hands back and up so that you end up in a high starting position for a descending cut, but with your hips and shoulders already rotated to your dominant side. Stop. Cut a proper descending cut with a passing step. Stand in a high point-in-line guard on your dominant side. For a detailed explanation, see the thrusting episode. Bring the point of your sword slightly up and to your dominant side so that it is angled for a descending cut. Simultaneously, bring your hands forwards. Stop. Cut a short descending cut. Cut a full ascending cut from the non-dominant side. Stop. Rotate your hands to bring the point up and to your dominant side so that it is angled for a descending cut. Stop. Do a proper descending cut. Cut a proper descending cut. Stop. Bring the sword back and behind you. Continue moving the sword along a smooth path behind you until it is in the start position of a descending cut. Stop. Cut a proper descending cut. Cut a proper ascending cut. Stop. Bring the sword back and down behind you until you are in the start position of a ascending cut. Stop. Cut a proper ascending cut. Stand with your dominant foot forwards. Cut a proper descending cut from the dominant side. Stop. Bring your hands up next to your head on the non-dominant side. Simultaneously, switch your front and back foot in place. Make sure that your sword is angled for a descending cut. Stop. Cut a proper descending cut from the non-dominant side. Cut a proper ascending cut from the dominant side. Stop. Bring your hands down on your non-dominant side so that you are in a proper starting position for an ascending cut. Stop. Cut a proper ascending cut from the non-dominant side. Stand in a high point-in-line guard on your dominant side. For a detailed explanation, see the thrusting episode. Parry a high cut to the non-dominant side of your head by turning the point towards your non-dominant side and rotating to your non-dominant side so that you cover the opening. Stop. Bring the point of your sword up and your hands behind your head. While rotating your center towards your dominant side, bring your hands to your dominant side so that you end up in the starting position of a descending cut. Stop. Do a proper descending cut with a passing step. Stand in a on-the-shoulder guard on your dominant side. Parry an ascending cut to your waist at your non-dominant side. Stop. Rotate your hands to bring the point of your sword back and to line the blade for an ascending cut. Stop. Do a proper short ascending cut. Cut a full descending cut from your dominant side. Stop. Bring your point and hands up to parry an attack to the non-dominant side of your head. In this section, we are making a feint. In other words, an attack which we stop partway through and then change the attack line. This also simulates an attack which was parried. These feints should be just like full cuts. They just stop abruptly before hitting our target. In the next episode, I will be teaching how to do shortcuts. That is how this feint should be done. Before that, you can simulate a shortcut by making a very slow and controlled cut until it is where you want it. This makes stopping the sword safe and easy. Now to the exercises. Cut a proper descending cut, but stop the cut before it hits your target. Stop. While rotating your center slightly towards your dominant side, bring your hands down slightly and bring the point of your sword down to align the blade for an ascending cut. Stop. Cut a proper short ascending cut. Stand in the low point-in-line guard for a thrust to the chest. See the thrusting episode for a more detailed explanation. Deliver a proper thrust to chest height target. Stop. Extract the blade. Stop. Bring the point of your sword up, then back and then down in a circular motion until you reach the starting position of the dominant side ascending cut. Stop. Cut a proper ascending cut. These example exercises should cover most of the common transition situations. Make sure that you take your time and learn all of these. Also, remember to learn transitions with every single cut you learn. I once again stress that some of these exercises are rather difficult. Take your time with the basics and then slowly add more demanding exercises to your training. I promise you, it is much faster than trying to learn too many things at once or learning too difficult things too early. Before we get to the recap, go and tap that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Transitions are extremely common in fencing. There are 5 basic starting situations and 3 basic follow-up actions. The basic starting situations are from a guard, after a full cut, after a cut which you stopped or which was parried, after a thrust or a failed cut, and after a parry. The basic follow-up actions are going to a guard, an offensive action, and a defensive action. When doing a transition, you should have a relaxed grip. When learning transitions, split the sequence into discrete parts with stops in between. After you can do that, start to remove the stops. After you can do the sequence without stops, you can start to blend the actions together. Take your time to learn transitions. Some of them can be very difficult.